What did you think of this week's Prep and Data? I thought that Tom came up with a really great challenge to showcase how getting those year-to-date, month-to-date, week-to-date values in Tableau isn't actually as intuitive as you might think, and it requires a bit more thinking. So in this video, I'm going to be going through how to prep the weekly targets dataset, the blue one at the top here. In the next video, I'll go through the transactions dataset and how we can join those together at the end. But for now, let's just look at the targets dataset. So we have, quite simply, quite a nicely formatted dataset really. We've got our product names, the year and week number, and our income and quantity targets. Now we want to make these daily targets rather than weekly targets. And I'm lazy and don't want to write two calculations. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to pivot the data, doing a wildcard pivot on the target fields so that they both go down into one field, and just doing a little bit of cleanup so that we have this sort of structure. So I can just write my one calculation where I do target divided by 7 to take it from being weekly to daily. So that's all nice and straightforward so far. Now, one thing that we want to focus on is all of our calculations are going to be to date. Our date that we're doing up to and including is the 9th of October 2020. So we know that that's within week 41 because Tom was nice enough to tell us in the challenge. So we're going to do some filtering of our data set just to simply only consider the relevant targets in our data set. And then to make some of these calculations work for, say, weekly or month to date calculations, we need to actually have some kind of date associated with these year and week values. So we're going to create a week start field. And to do that, we're just going to be using the date pass function. So date pass function is giving the function some strings and telling it how these strings relate to date parts, basically. So we are saying W and then 4Ys is the equivalent of adding our week and our year together as strings. So that would literally just be, 1 2020, 2 2020, etc. so forth. And this can give us our week start. So that's how I'm building that calculation up. The date at the start is just to take the time function away because date pass will always output a date time field, whereas we want it to just be a date field. So we do this step, and if we come to the top here, then we see that the 1st of January is our first week start, which makes sense. But the 1st of January 2020 is a Wednesday, and then week 2 then starts on a Wednesday as well, which isn't exactly what we want our date structure to be like. So we need to just write another calculator field to sort that out. So we're saying that if our week is week 1, then leave it as is, but otherwise we need to minus 3 days from our week start to have it not starting on a Wednesday, but have it starting on a Sunday instead. As Tom mentioned in the challenge, that's how he wanted it to work. So a couple of things to really be careful of there when you're getting this week start field set up. But now we can start doing our year-to-date, month-to-date, and week-to-date calculations. So let's take a look at those. Our year-to-date calculation looks fairly straightforward, doesn't look too daunting. So we're saying that if our week is week 41, then we're going to multiply our target by 6. So because there are 6 days in that week up to the 9th of October, up to and including the 9th of October, I should say, as Tom mentioned to us in the requirements in the challenge. So we make sure we sort that sort of unique case out first. And then in our first week, as we were discussing, that is only Wednesday to Saturday. So we need to only have 4 days included there. And then all other weeks can be counted as 7-day weeks, and we can multiply the target by 7 for those weeks. So not too difficult, but definitely takes some thinking about to make sure that you're multiplying by the right values and getting the right numbers. Now let's move on to the month to date. I will mention briefly that these calculations, I'm going to copy these and paste them into the description below. So rather than you having to go back and write these all out yourselves, if you've been struggling, you can definitely pick up these from the comments below or from our solution post on the Prepping Data website that Tom will write up. So our month-to-date calculation, again, looks a bit not the nicest, but basically it's just a long if statement. So we know that we can break it down into manageable steps here. So we're saying that if our month of our week start is the same as the month of the 9th of October 2020, so basically if it's October in our week start, then we're going to be taking the number of days from our week start to the 9th of October. But then this calculation never includes that first day. So we need to also add a 1, as you'll see here. So that's how many days we need to multiply the target by. So we need to do it in this way because the 9th of October is a Friday. So we only want to be taking from that week start, that is, I can't think of what the week start for that week is off the top of my head, but we basically just don't want to be multiplying it by 7 because the week needs to only go up to the 9th of October. So that's how we deal with that week. If there were weeks, sort of whole weeks, this would also deal with that and would give this first part of the calculation would return a 7. So, but in this case, it returns a 6 for us. So now let's move on to all the other lovely else ifs that we've got going on. So the reason we have these else ifs going down the side here, these are all to deal with where the week might start in September but end in October. Because obviously we want those October target values, but we don't want the ones from September. So we just want October 1st, 2nd, 3rd, etc. and so forth. So we're just saying, if that month, when we add a day to the start of the week, is equal to the month of October, then we're going to need to multiply it by 6. So the week start, I believe, is something like the 27th of September in our data at the moment. So we know that that row of data would not be included in this if at the top here because the week starts in September. So we're saying if we add a day, only one day, if we add one day and get to October, then we need to multiply our target by 6. If we add 2 days and get to October, then we multiply it by 5. If we add 3 days, we multiply it by 4, etc. and so forth. And that's the reason we have to write it out like this, is because we only have a row per week start rather than having a row per day in our data set. So I hope that makes enough sense. The kind of unwritten bit of this statement is that if it doesn't meet any of these conditions, it's just going to be a null, and therefore when we come to sum it together, it won't matter, it'll just count as a 0. So there we are. You can see that already we've got a lot more nulls in the month to date than we have in the year to date, which makes sense because in the year to date we are just adding together all the values basically, whereas the month to date we're not going to be including any values from months other than October, sorry. So finally, let's just talk about the week to date. That's our last kind of calculation that's going to take some talking through, and it's all plain sailing once we've got to this point. So we start off our if statement by saying if our week start date is equal to the 9th of October, then we would just have the target value there. We know that that's not the case in our data set, but it's good to sort of start from there. And you can imagine that if this were a more dynamic workflow, we would have, today's date in here, so it would be working more dynamically. So it's good to kind of build out the logic, even if for this data set it's not actually the case. So we take our target if our week start was the same as the 9th of October. Then we're basically doing a similar thing to what we did in our month to date, where we're saying if we're adding a day to the week start and getting to the 9th of October, then that would mean there would be 2 days in our week to date. And you just keep going as you add on all the different dates. And yeah, if we were to add 6 days on and get to the 9th of October, that would mean that the 9th of October was the last day of our week, and we would want to take that whole week's target value. So that's basically how that is working, just checking every single day to find out where to take the week to date up to and where to take it from. So when we do that, then we have a lot more nulls and we only actually get, 9 values there. Worth mentioning, obviously, that because we've got our product names, there are 5 different products and there are 2 different metrics. So that makes sense that we've got our 9 values there. So now all that's left to do is to do our aggregations, grouping by our product names, our metrics, summing up those week to dates, month to dates, and year to dates, doing a little bit of cleaning to round all of those calculations to 0 decimal places, and then we're simply going to pivot those. So we're using the wildcard pivot to find the values that have the TD in there, to date, and then we have our product name, our metric, our time period, and our target value. And now that's ready to be joined on to our clean transaction data, which you will find how to calculate that in the next video. So thank you for watching this one.